afternoon and welcome back to GSC Executives podcast with your host, Caitlin Tye. And today we're thrilled to have on Emma Kent, who is Managing Director at VINCI Technology Centre. How are you today?
Hi, I'm fine. Thank you very much for hosting me today.
Thank you very much for being on. Have you had a busy day or...?
Yeah, I've had a few meetings already and I was very excited to come and meet you this afternoon.
Brilliant. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on. So just for our listeners, could you give me a brief background on how you've achieved the position you're in today?
Yeah, sure. So I went to university and studied civil engineering when I finished school. So I did quite a traditional route into the civil engineering industry. I did a 4-year MEng degree in civil engineering at Nottingham. I went and did a graduate programme with Bureau Happold, which was a really great experience and supported me to get my chartered engineer status. And after I worked at Bureau Happold, I went to another design consultancy called Cundall. I did a few years there before moving client side and working for the Met Police for nearly 6 years as their construction director, and then jumping back onto the contractor side to join VINCI last year.
Yeah, because is it about 7 months you've been there?
It's about 7 months, I joined in September. Yeah, really enjoying it so far. Yeah, it's a really good place to work and I'm really glad I made the move.
Brilliant. And so kind of how come you decided to pursue your career in civil engineering then?
Well, I think like most civil engineers, I wanted to make the world a better place. And I think it seems like a lofty goal, but I think if you ask a lot of civil engineers, they did choose that profession because they really felt passionately that they could do that. And I think specifically with civil engineering, you are creating something tangible. And I find that particularly satisfying. So you can actually go back and see what you've created in the future and be proud that you've made something that's had an impact on the world.
Yeah. No, because I guess it's something physical. So
exactly. It's a physical asset. I did that. I worked here. I made that. I designed that. Yeah. It's really satisfying.
So with being in a senior position in a very dominated industry, has this impacted you throughout your career at all?
I think it has, yes. I think there's a few different ways that it's impacted me. I think the first one is that I feel quite visible. And even our conversation today is a bit about visibility, isn't it? It's about visible female leadership in the construction industry. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I feel quite exposed in that position of visibility. Maybe like what I say or what I do can be judged a little bit more harshly or analysed quite heavily. So I think that has had an impact on me. And that kind of feeling of not always being the norm, that can be quite tiring, that effort of fitting in. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I just want to be normal. I just want to feel normal because that feels easy, you know? And actually when you're alone, it can be quite tiring. So I think that's the second way it's impacted me, is that over my career, I've had these phases of being more active versus more restful, where I've been really proactive about women's inclusion and discussing gender, and other times I'm like, I'm just going to get on with my job for a year or two.
Like, why can't I just focus on the thing that I'm here to
and
be
so
doing?
Having that balance between pushing for better inclusion for women and actually just getting on with my job, that's something that I've had to find because it can be quite tiring otherwise. And then there's this kind of third angle to this position of somewhat seniority in the male-dominated industry, and that's that feeling of responsibility, that feeling that I have to use my position to make life easier for those who come after me. And I don't think everyone who is from a sort of minoritized group in the construction industry necessarily feels that sense of responsibility. There's always the odd person who's kind of done it the hard way and pulled the drawbridge up behind them. But I really feel like it's part of my role is to make life easier so that more people can be included in the future. And that responsibility weighs quite heavy on my shoulders sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine, because for me, I find that the fact that you're in, as you say, such a senior position, you want other people to follow in your footsteps. That's another reason of doing the podcast, to inspire the future generation to be like, yes, you can do this. Like, you can get to this position. Obviously, it takes hard work to get there. But it is possible from any background, any kind of, from, yeah, as I say, any background, anything like that. Yeah. So why do you think diversity and inclusion is an important topic of discussion?
Well, I mean, until we have fair and proper representation, we're always going to have these conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're also always going to have, biased decision making, whether that's conscious or unconscious.
Yeah.
If we don't have representative decision making groups, we're not going to have fair and equitable decisions. And so, like, on a really basic level, we've kind of all had that scenario where you've walked into a toilet in a new building and the hand dryer is actually at your eye level and not at your hand level. And you just think, this has not been designed by someone who's the same size as me.
Yeah.
And so, as long as we're having conversations like that, we have to talk about diversity and inclusion. And like, when you put that, at a more serious level, women are more likely to be seriously injured. I think it's 50% more likely, 45% more likely to be injured in a car crash than men. And they're also more likely to die in a car crash because basically cars have been designed by men for men with crash test dummies that are shaped like men. And so you kind of think, it's not that women are weaker or we're not more likely to be injured because we're soft. It's because we're literally in a world that hasn't been designed for women.
Yeah.
And so I feel like those kind of conversations about diversity and inclusion, they have to keep happening until we are in a world that's designed to include everybody. And I don't just mean women by that. I mean, people who are in a wheelchair. I didn't think about how many steps there are in the world until I started moving around with a buggy. And that's someone who's in a wheelchair. That's their everyday experience, not just a period of their life. So until we've got that world that is inclusive of everyone, we have to keep talking about diversity and inclusion.
Definitely. Well, as you say, obviously I've hurt my ankle at the moment.
Yeah, hobbling around.
I didn't think, even just getting around London, the amount of lifts that are out of service, the tube,
the steps you've got to go up and down.
It's just, I think until you're in that situation, it doesn't, you don't really understand it, but it really does then open your eyes to see a lack of diverse there is and what we need to do to kind of, that's why we need more of it.
Yeah, and that's why we need to have diverse voices and a decision-making table so that we can gather all of that experience and use it to influence how we change the world around us.
So what strategies are currently in place at VINCI to help improve diversity and inclusion in the workplace?
So, like, big picture, VINCI has got a gender equality plan. They're looking at sort of actionable strategies to attract and retain women and to create inspiring career paths. So at an international level, VINCI set the goal of 30% women managers by 2030, which you think, on the face of it, you think, well, that should be easy. But actually, if you think, well, it's only 6 years to go until 2030, and you've got to get that pipeline of talent, you've got to develop that talent and put them in a position where they've got the capability to be in a management role. So actually, it is a long-term strategy to get people there. And, VINCI actually looks at diversity and inclusion in a big picture way. So it's not just about women. And they've recently launched the VINCI, I think it's called the VINCI Expert Programme, which is about sharing insights from older employees and making sure that that's an active part of knowledge transfer and that we're really kind of valuing those more veteran voices who've had a lot of experience that they can bring to the table rather than assuming that they're just on a trajectory for retirement. So it's really about valuing lots of different voices and not just about women. I think the other thing about VINCI is that, from my experience, is that they're putting their money where their mouth is. So
it's not just all talk.
Yeah, exactly. So to just come to my own personal experience, so VINCI Technology Centre, my business, falls under VINCI Construction UK. And when I was interviewing for my job, I said that I wanted to work a 4-day week. And that was kind of a bit of a showstopper for me. I've got 2 very young children. And so finding a fulfilling role where I could work 4 days a week was a real priority for me.
Yeah.
And other employers, who I won't name, but other employers who I spoke to during that recruitment process ghosted me or just said, we're not interested in someone who works part-time. You can't do a senior role part-time, things like that. VINCI said, okay, we recognise that we want to have a more diverse leadership team.
Yeah.
And in order to have a more diverse leadership team, we need to be more flexible about the way that we approach work. Yeah. And so they came to that conversation really positively. And the outcome was that I got the job and I worked 4 days a week. So, they got the talent, I hope, that they were looking for. And I got the flexibility that I was looking for. So to me, that's a win-win.
Yeah.
And it shows that VINCI's actually putting their policies into practice. It's not just a bit of paper.
Yeah. And well, as you say, having young kids, I know my mum, she only worked 4 days a week and was in a senior position. And she'd said that even then it was very kind of not common for it to happen.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
And for you to go into a new job as well, not just kind of
flex your old job down. Yeah. But I think that it's really important that women don't feel trapped by flexibility. So because they've been offered a flexible role by their employer who they've got a track record with, it'd be easy for a woman to feel like, well, I can't leave now. And actually, we should all be talking about flexibility at the point of interview in order to get that more diverse talent in the pipeline.
Yeah. And even kind of with paternity leave and things like that as well, because obviously that's a lot shorter than kind of maternity leave, which is kind of understandable.
But we did shared parental leave, my husband and I, and so he took 3 months off when I went back to work. And I think that's shared parental leave and really making sure that fathers feel like they're an actual functioning part of the care for that child. That has to help inclusion as well, because those men who are then in decision making positions have got that direct experience of child rearing, and therefore they're able to be more empathetic to women who are in that situation as well.
Yeah It's all about getting that education.
Exactly. Having the conversations.
Exactly. So could you describe how your career has been enhanced by exposure to diverse people, places or experiences?
Yes, I can. So I recognised that I didn't have a particularly diverse upbringing. You know, I grew up in a market town in the countryside. It was very much, middle England.
Yeah.
So I went off to university and even just going off to university in a big city, that was quite eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
And it was the first time really that I met a large number of people who didn't kind of come from a middle-class background. So even that exposure to people who'd had a different upbringing and a different kind of childhood, I found that very enlightening at that point when I was quite young. Later on in my career, so in my 20s, I was seconded to a company in Sydney, Australia. And as well as being great lifestyle choice for a couple of years, I found it was very beneficial to me to be exposed to different working practices, different kind of working culture, and also to actually take away that sort of safety net that I'd got of friends and family and everything in the UK. And it forced me to go out and make new friends, start new hobbies, really kind of throw yourself into that different way of life. So I found that really beneficial. And it also helped me to understand the experience that other people might have if they move to a new city or a new country where they don't know anyone. And it led to me trying to include people who were new in the geography when I was back in the UK as well. When I came back from Sydney, I moved to London. So again, that was a bit much more diverse, a friendship group, living circumstances, that kind of thing. And I also took on a role chairing a group called Urbanistas, their London chapter, co-chairing it with another woman. And that group was about amplifying women's voices in kind of urban design and urban leadership. And so I met people from more diverse professions, so not just engineers, but also a more socially diverse group of people. And I really think that it was Urbanistas that started to open my eyes to the fact that diversity was a much more kind of intersectional situation where it's not just about being a woman or it's not just about being black, but maybe it's about being a black woman who grew up in a council estate, and you start to understand there's intersections of different characteristics that form the discussion around diversity. But it was also Urbanistas that made me start to think that inclusion is a very active, very intentional process. It doesn't happen just by getting diverse people in a room. Inclusion has to be about actively making people feel like their voices are valued and that their seat at the table is assured. I went on to work for the Met Police, love them or hate them, and they've had a lot of bad press lately, but I still believe that they were the most diverse place that I've ever worked. There was far more women, there was far more people from different ethnic backgrounds, like I said, different social classes and social backgrounds, people with long-term disabilities, different religions, way more diverse than the construction industry.
Oh, wow.
Like, because, you think about diversity in the construction industry, and actually, as well as women, it's not particularly ethnically diverse.
Yeah.
Have you met many people with a long-term disability in the construction industry? So you start to realise, oh, actually, the Met Police, although we like to say that, we like to be critical of the Met Police, it was actually a very diverse team that I worked with. And so I learned a lot from that as well. So yeah, I've had a lot of different experiences, but recognising that, I've got this kind of privilege where I actually grew up in a very undiverse kind of way. And so I've had to kind of actively go out and take what I can from those different experiences.
Yeah. And just putting them in place and kind of what you're doing at this moment. Yeah. So what would you say are the long-term consequences if we ignore or fail to recognise diversity inclusion in the workplace?
So I was thinking about this quite a lot, actually, because I think big picture, we know through research that diverse teams, when well managed and when they're actively including all of the voices, those teams perform better. So if we don't have diverse teams where people are treated equitably, then we're just not achieving all that we could do for our projects, but also we're not achieving the best outcomes for our businesses and for our entire society. And I was thinking about this in the kind of context of the climate crisis. So I think specifically we're moving into this era where we're not just trying to prevent climate change. We know climate change is so we're now moving into this era of climate change adaptation. And it's often those people who are not part of the decision-making elite who are most affected by climate change. And so you're thinking, it's women and girls, it's people from small island nations, it's people who are adversely impacted, but who don't have a voice or a seat at the table. And so I just think from the perspective of climate change and that very long term, ultra long term adaptation to climate change, how can we not recognise that diversity and inclusion is a factor in how we decide what to do? So yeah, I think, when you look in that ultra long term perspective, the consequences are enormous if we don't include everyone in the decision making.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And as you say, climate change is happening now. I mean, we now only get one day a year that's sunny, so
yeah, exactly.
Come back to Australia.
Yeah, well, they're not immune to it. Drought and things like that. It's just they're affected by climate change in a different way. So yeah,
maybe the slightly better way than that, but I'll let you decide on that one. So could you share a time where you've had to make a difficult decision as a leader, and how did you approach this?
I was struggling with this question because I think as leaders, we take a lot of decisions quite often. And I think what was a difficult decision for me 5 years ago might not represent a difficult decision today. Do you see what I mean? So as you grow in seniority and experience, your ability to make decisions becomes more effective.
Yes, of course.
So I was thinking about a time in my last job where we were trying to align a lease on a building, a contract for construction, and the governance process that we needed to get through with the authority. And basically we had to have the governance in place, but we had to make a decision because we couldn't get all three things done on the same day. And so we had to take a risk about whether to sign the lease or proceed with the construction contract and how we were going to align those two. And I remember I just spent absolutely hours on the phone with my boss, with my boss's boss. And I think, and also with, the end user of the project, the construction contractor, the estates team who were looking after the lease. And I think the thing that I found was I needed lots and lots of people's opinions. But ultimately I had to make a decision about what I was going to do. And so I think that point with a leader, to bring it back to that kind of difficult decision as a leader, the difficulty was in getting all of those opinions together and then choosing the right way forward. So everybody feels like their voice has been heard. But ultimately we weren't ever going to get to a consensus. We just had to do something. And so I think to bring it back to that kind of diversity point, if you're going to have a diverse group of people around the table, then our role as a leader is not necessarily to get everybody to agree with each other.
But it makes your decision easier because you've got so many
exactly
from different backgrounds, and therefore you can say, oh well, more people might say this, or
Yeah.
actually no, but that person said that.
Or you've just
They-
triggered a thought in my mind. Why didn't we think of this before?
Exactly.
Here's a risk that we hadn't
Mhm.
analysed before, but because we've got a diverse group of people, now we're picking up on different factors that influence the decision making.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes as leaders, consensus is the enemy of actually making a decision. And if you've got that diverse team there, you're not necessarily going to find a way forward where every single person agrees.
Yeah.
But if you've made sure that everybody's had their opinion heard, and if you've factored in the different opinions that they've got and the different sort of risks and issues and opportunities that might arise from those varied voices, then you're likely to get to a point where you've got a decent decision as well.
Yeah. And hopefully that whatever the outcome of that,
everyone can get behind it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm interested to kind of know on the flip side of that, what your greatest achievement is.
So I think my greatest achievement is probably my 2 children.
Yeah, of course.
So it doesn't go without saying they do deserve reference. And I'm very proud of the fact that they seem to be turning into very decent human beings, because ultimately as a parent, you want to grow some people who are going to be good members of society, and they're only 4 and 2, so it's early days. But, I'm very proud of them as they are at the moment. But outside of kind of the personal life, I think my greatest achievement was achieving my MBA when my daughter was very young. So I started my MBA when my first child was 11 weeks old. And I completed my MBA 11 weeks before my second child was born. So I had a very tight window opportunity in there. And I managed to go and do an MBA whilst being on maternity leave, and then whilst I was going back to work. Oh, and there was a global pandemic in the middle of that as well, just to add some extra complexity. So I really felt like that process, it took 20 months to do my MBA. And I really felt like it was a test of my resilience and kind of my personal commitment, my organizational skills. And also I found it a hugely enriching experience as well. I learned an incredible amount from the rest of my cohort, as well as the courses that we were going on and the kind of personal development angle that we went through as well. We had coaching, there was a lot of personal and professional development as well as academic learning. And so I did all of that whilst I was raising a newborn and working as well. So I feel like that's quite a big achievement for me. And I still look back on it and think, oh, I did that. Yeah, I did that. I can pat myself on the back for that. Yeah.
I know. Congratulations. And as you say, during a pandemic. So was it all online then?
I started the MBA in 2019, so we were able to start in person. And then in spring 2020, we moved online.
Yeah.
In the autumn of 2020, we started to have some lectures back in person again, sort of August, September, October. Went back online for that winter of 2020 when we had that awful lockdown that went on for months.
Yeah.
Same for the spring of 2021. And then right at the end of the course, we went back in person again. But at that point, I was pregnant with my second child. And so I didn't want to go in person because the risk was too high. So I stuck with the overseas cohort who continued online. So I continued online till the end. Graduated in absence, which is really boring because you just get a certificate at the post and it's like, well done. And then I had my proper graduation over a year after I actually finished the course in 2022.
Well, at least you still got your proper graduation.
Eventually, yeah.
You do the exam online then?
So, well, actually all of the examined elements we actually had done before COVID. So I did my last exams in March 2020, just before the first national lockdown.
Okay, and then the rest was
coursework. So it was quite difficult though, doing the group coursework, all based on Teams and no face-to-face interaction.
Yeah.
And really, I think, everybody was adapting to these new ways of working. And I was doing that at work and trying to do that through my university course as well. And people were in different time zones, different countries. There was one young woman who was in Beijing, and we didn't see her again until like a year and a half after we graduated, because people were not allowed to travel to and from China for so long. So it was a real social challenge.
Yeah. hopefully
Hopefully behind us.
Yeah, I know. Let's hope there's not another one for a while, at least, but you never know. So you're also a member of the Audit Committee of the Institution of Civil Engineers, tasked with ensuring good governance of the charity and its work. What made you decide to be a part of this?
So the Audit Committee is there to support the Board of Trustees in sort of discharging their responsibilities. So the Audit Committee does things like providing oversight of internal control systems, risk management, financial reporting, but also supervising the auditors, so external auditors, internal auditors, and basically ensuring that the charity is run effectively.
Yeah.
So I had actually already been a trustee of the Institution of Civil Engineers in the past, and then I moved on to the Audit Committee after a gap. And really, I felt like Audit Committee offered a opportunity to take the skills that I'd learned in my MBA, marry them with the kind of skills that I'd picked up in my career and, through particularly working in the public sector where governance is a very strong part of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And actually use those skills together for something that I feel really passionate about, which is the work of the Institution of Civil Engineers. And so for me, it was a really good fit. And I also felt like the Audit Committee, it's a bit like, I'm glad we're talking about it because I feel like they're unsung heroes, really. So it's a very important member-led committee that really sort of ensures that the ICE is being run in a good way.
Yes.
And you might have assumed that all charities are well run maybe 10 years ago, but over the last decade, we've had a few scandals with different charities who haven't been well governed. And so, this is a risk, even for a big charity like the ICE. So I felt like it's a really important role and something that I could bring some value to as well. So yeah, it was a double win, really.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, as you say, to be part of something that has such a kind of personal influence to yourself as well.
Yeah,
really
exactly.
rewarding.
Yeah.
And so could you name a person, if there is a person, who's had an impact on you as a leader, maybe someone who's been a mentor to you, and how has this person impacted your life?
So when I was thinking about people who've had an impact on me, there was absolutely loads. So it's really hard to boil it down to one.
Point, yeah.
Particularly, I think there's some women who've gone before me who set that path that I was then able to follow that I felt were really important.
Yeah.
So I think I'll just, it's a shout out to the women who've gone before who really helped me in my early career. But I think one of my most recent sort of influences, I guess, is Anusha Shah, and she is president of the Institution of Civil Engineers now.
Yeah.
And so she is a really powerfully people-centered leader, which I find incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
It's the first time, she's the third woman and first ethnic minority president of the ICE. So that's hugely impressive. But it's also, it's not just about those characteristics, it's about her leadership style. So she's the first time that I've ever heard a leader in civil engineering advocate for nature-based solutions that safeguard the environment and provide benefit for people. So she's got this really nature-focused, people-focused approach. She's encouraging us all to find our ikigai, which is a sort of Japanese word that means it marries your purpose with your sort of personal passions in your professional context. So it's kind of about bringing your whole self to work and finding real meaning in what you do by it being representative of you as a person and your beliefs. And so I just find these messages really inclusive and really about people and the way that people can be the main focus of civil engineering. Because ultimately, if you go back to that first question about why did you become a civil engineer, well, it was to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to do that without people, are you?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just through concrete alone. and the other thing is she is one of these leaders who has really opened doors for other people. And again, I find that as being something that is, she's demonstrating how to include people. And that's, you don't always see leaders doing that. So as an example, during Ramadan, a couple of weeks ago, she held the ICE's first ever iftar dinner. So iftar is when Muslims break fast after a day of fasting during Ramadan.
Yeah.
And it's done with prayer and with, they start, the first food that they eat is dates, and there's a special drink. And I was invited, which I felt hugely lucky because I'm not a Muslim. So I felt it was really exciting to be part of this event. Yeah. The world's first, iftar dinner hosted by the ICE. But also, she was making Muslim civil engineers feel seen and feel included and feel valued by creating something that was for them. And I found that so inspirational.
And I think as well, as you say, for you to, as yourself being not a Muslim, to be invited, to show that it's not segregating. Oh, well,
exactly.
I'm a Muslim, I'm hosting this event, but it's only Muslims going. It's like, no, we're all inclusive.
Yeah.
We should, even if you may not celebrate it yourself, it's a good experience to learn what they celebrate. And as you say, I know of the day, but I couldn't tell you the details of the specific food and drink that they have. So to kind of learn about that would have been really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that becomes now part of my experience, which I can then take into other conversations. And it made a whole group of members of the Institution of Civil Engineers feel even more valued.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of looking back at your career, is there anything at all that you would change? It's a bit of a big question.
So what would I change about my career? I would probably tell my younger self to worry less about the future. I am 100%, I am not doing the job today that I imagined that I would do 20 years ago.
In a good or bad?
In a good way, absolutely in a good way. But I had a very linear view of what my career was going to be. I was going to go and be a graduate engineer, then an engineer, then a senior engineer. One day I'd stay in consultancy and be promoted to being a partner. And, I had this really linear ladder view of my career, and it's not been like that. It's been like a jungle gym, or it's not a straight line. But from that I've had much more fulfillment. So I would have told myself, don't worry about it, it's all going to be fine. And I think I would have urged myself to be a little bit more confident and a bit less worried about ticking off all those boxes. So I really thought, and I'd internalized this idea that when I had kids my career would be over, and I think a lot of young women probably still take that with them. So I felt like I had to tick off all of this stuff before I stopped and had kids. But my career has gone from strength to strength since I had my kids. I've done my MBA, I've got a new job with VINCI as a managing director. I would have just told myself not to worry so much, and that actually you can have children and still have a fulfilling career, still even accelerate your career after you've had your children, because you're bringing a different perspective and a different life experience. So I would have told myself, worry less, it's not going to be a straight line, it's fine for it to wiggle all over the place. And I would have told myself to be a little bit more confident, a little bit more bullish. Maybe I would have had my kids a bit younger if I was a bit more confident, because I'd have been sure that my career would continue and would take off afterwards. So I think they're kind of the things that I would have told my younger self.
I mean, I guess with the thing with worry, there's always going to be a worry there throughout your life in general.
Yeah, of course.
I guess going throughout your career, it's all a learning experience, and whether it be a good or a bad one, as long as you learn from that, then
exactly.
Hopefully then runs smoothly.
And I think as you get older, you are more confident naturally. So I'm less apologetic. I say sorry less often. And I think that's kind of that experience of gaining that confidence, gaining that assuredness has come through the many and varied different experiences that I've had to get to this point. So I would always urge young women particularly to be more confident about their future.
Because I know a lot of women get imposter syndrome as well.
Exactly.
Just kind of, and a lot of people who have been on the podcast have said that's what they get, and they realize looking back now that they wish that they had just had that bit more confidence. And that's why having kind of the strong leaders such as yourself to kind of help motivate the younger generations, be like, you can do this. This is an opportunity that's out there. It hopefully can give them the confidence to say, yes, I can do this.
Absolutely. And I think I've heard there's a leadership speaker called Lauren Curry who I've heard speak, and she was talking recently about how imposter syndrome affects women because it's a function of a world that wasn't designed to include women. And
Back
so
to the
you
car.
think about, you go back to the car, you go back to our conversation about creating diverse teams. What's my responsibility? And if I take my responsibility seriously of making life better for the people who follow on behind me, then I'm going to make an environment where they don't need to have imposter syndrome, where they don't feel imposter syndrome because they feel that everything that they say and their voice and their opinion is valued at face value, as opposed to having to be apologetic. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't quite agree with you on that. Well, imposter syndrome, we can correct for that in our role as leaders. So I take that responsibility seriously.
Oh, definitely. And I guess even more so now that you've got kids as well, you want your kids to have every opportunity and to have that
Absolutely, yeah.
So it'll probably help motivate you more to kind of enhance making sure that the future generation does kind of get those opportunities. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. And I'm very proud of the fact that my daughter is a very confident little 4-year-old, and I will continue to encourage her to take that confidence through education and through her career. And obviously I'm also slightly scared of what that might mean for me as a person, but I can't wait to see what she turns into when she grows up.
Well, hopefully she has as good a career as you.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Both of them do. Well, thank you very much, Emma, for being on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much for hosting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the GSC Executives podcast. Today's conversation was hosted and recorded by Caitlin Tye, with editing and production managed by Stephen Smith. The podcast is produced by GSC Executives in conjunction with Daniel Owen Limited. For more details about our executive search solutions, as well as upcoming episodes, please visit our website, gscexecutives.co.uk. If you're keen to hear more industry insights, please consider subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Until next time, continue to lead with excellence.